My name is Cheria, and for a living, I turn workplaces into growth spaces. This podcast is a front row seat into my own personal and professional development as I talk with inspiring people about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. Welcome to Grow There with Cheria. When I was a kid, I had a profound life experience that changed everything about who I am. Change is the wrong word. It was and is foundational to who I am. I am not myself without having had this life experience. And that is the fact that I went away to sleepaway camp every single year from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, and throughout the rest of my childhood and beyond. And if you were someone who went away to camp, you know how special camp can be. But I'm going to raise the ante and say that this camp was special because I wasn't supposed to be there. See, I had the privilege of going away once a week to a camp with 100+ kids who looked just like me, Black and brown kids going away to summer camp, going away to just be kids. But there was something that we did not have in common, and that was that they all lived with sickle cell disease, and I did not. Myself and my sister and some of my cousins and other staff kids got to come to camp. So there were probably about five to seven of us who got to come to camp. And it taught me empathy and compassion in such a tangible way. It forced me to confront myself and my privilege, even as a little one whose brain even wasn't fully formed. I began to understand what privilege meant. It taught me so much about our responsibility to help others and to contribute to this world. And most importantly, it taught me about loving your neighbor, loving your community. And the person I have to thank for that is my aunt. And I'm so grateful. Mary Brown is the president and CEO of the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation and a nationally respected leader who has devoted more than 4 decades to advancing care, equity, and opportunity for individuals and families impacted by sickle cell disease. For over 20 years, she has led the foundation, guiding extraordinary growth and deepening its impact across California and beyond. In 2016, she helped establish an advanced practice medical home at the Martin Luther King Jr. Outpatient Center, Los Angeles' only dedicated sickle cell clinic serving publicly insured adults. She has served in so many key leadership roles nationwide, it is hard to list them all, but here's a couple. She has been a longtime board member of the Center of Inherited Blood Disorders, and she also served as the president of the Executive Directors Leadership Council on the board of directors for the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, helping strengthen the national network of community-based organizations for more than a decade. She has received countless chairman's legacy leadership awards. But beyond all those accolades, and I have to tell you, she is just so highly decorated. She is someone who has steadfastly and faithfully championed the lives of people with sickle cell disease for decades. I am so deeply honored to call her my aunt. So without further ado, it's time to grow there with Mary Brown. It's hard to start this and say, hi, Mary Brown, because it's really, hi, Auntie Mary. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Shay, how are you?
I'm doing so good. And I'm so I'm just so excited to have this conversation. I've been thinking about a lot of things. I've been thinking about you being my second family member to be on the podcast. Mom was on it before, and that was a really popular episode. I've been thinking about the fact that you were really my first kind of nonprofit, I'm gonna even say corporate job, like that you were my boss. And I feel like every time we get to talk in this way, it reminds me of just all of the things that you have given me as a human being that helped me to become who I am. And plus, I was thinking about truly, oh my God, I'm gonna get choked up already. It's like I think Auntie Mary was like my first role model outside of my parents, my first person that I looked up to. And so I'm just so excited to have a conversation with you and share some of your story with this audience.
Well, Cheria, you were the first niece that I went to the hospital to witness birth. Although it took you so long to get here, I went home. So
I
as
took
soon
my
as I got
time,
home, it's
25
no,
hours.
she's here. I was like, oh my God. Well, so yeah, we have a few things in common, I guess,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was an experience to go in the labor room and to see all of those things that were going on with your mom. And I was just like, oh my God. And then watching your dad walk down the hall because he was so tired. He was walking crooked. It's like, oh my God.
It does seem like quite an event. I always, uh, I took 25 hours for those listening. I took 25 hours. My mom was in labor for 25 hours and they had to pull me out with forceps, and which I don't think they do that anymore. And my head was a little jacked up because of it. And grandpa said, "Is she going to stay that way?" It was quite an event. Plus, my parents were praying in faith that I be a boy. And so, not that we're into gendered things these days, but I definitely went home in quote unquote boys' clothes in my blue onesie because that's all they had. It was quite an event, but here I am, and here we are, and I'm so happy all these years, 42 years later, to be sitting down to have this conversation with you. That's wild.
That is wild. It really
Wild.
is.
Well, you know that this podcast it's really a podcast about growth and resilience. And I ask all my guests to tell me a story. I ask you all to do heavy lifting and to tell me a story about a time when either your personal life impacted your professional life or vice versa, and how you grew as a result of that. And so I'd love to just get out of the way and give you the floor to start sharing your story with us.
Well, giving this some thought, from my personal life to my professional life, it is a story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long journey. And it started when I was about 6 years old. I was riding my bike down the street to say hi to a friend of mine. They called her name was Joyce, but they called her Baby Joyce. She was 12 years old. She was a lot smaller than most 12-year-old kids. And she was sickly. And she used to sit on the top step and lean against the house. And, we didn't talk much, but it was part of my routine. When I got on my bike, I would ride down there, I should say, and see her. Um, and then one day I went down and I saw a black wreath on the front door. And I went home and she wasn't sitting on the porch. And I went home and asked my mom, I said, why is the black flowers, at Baby Joyce's house? And my mom was saying, well, that generally means somebody might have died in the house. Well,
Mm-hmm.
let me check and see. So she did her investigatory work and then told me later on that evening that it was Baby Joyce that had passed away, that she had a blood disease that affected Negro people.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, you know, um, and had to get used to this idea that she was gone.
Yeah.
Fast forward, I'm working as a TA at the LA Unified School District, and I'm also doing Girl Scout work. Well, going back a little bit further, my mom and dad said we can go and do whatever we need to go and do. Let's learn stuff. So we traveled to Yosemite, Sequoia National Park. I'm a big camp person, big
Yeah.
outdoors person, because my mom and dad wanted to expose us to as much as they could. And they also wanted to make sure that we knew that there was a world outside that
Mm.
they wanted us to begin to explore. So needless to say, as kids, we were, packed into a station wagon, laying on top of eggs and all this other kind of stuff because we didn't know what we were doing, and my parents certainly didn't know what they were doing for quite some time. But we did a lot of camping, and then I was working for the school district, and I ended up with three months off in the summer. So one of my teacher friends came up to me and she said, "Hey, they need a camp director at the Sickle Cell Disease Research Foundation." And I
Mm.
said, "What is that?" And so, needless to say, I'm going to tell you, I'm old. So I didn't go to Google, but I went to the encyclopedia and looked up sickle cell disease, and it kind of switched me back to being 6 years old. And I said, well, I wonder if this is what, you know, um, Joyce died from.
Yeah.
So I had an interview at the foundation, and they accepted me. One, because I had probably experienced living in the dirt with my family for a week, and had some experience with the scouts,
Mm.
being a what do they call it? I think it was a unit leader was
Mm.
title. Anyway, long story short, I just got fascinated by sickle cell disease. And in the school board, they wanted to make a lot of changes at one point, and I said, I'm not doing it.
Mm.
I work like I need to do that. Get on a bus and ride 6 hours to somewhere to be with kids and then come back. No, I'm not doing that. So I
Mm.
quit. Quit. And when I quit, I contacted the foundation and I said, "Hey, I'm in between jobs. I'm thinking about opening a preschool with a friend of mine, which I was. But what do you have right now for me to, potentially do?" Short story, they said, "Oh, we need a bookkeeper." I'm like, "Oh God, I hate books. I hate numbers. Can't stand it." So I said, "Well, never mind. I need to get into work." Um, that part-time job has turned into a lifelong uh, journey with sickle cell disease.
Mm.
It was the most, and continues to be, one of the most fascinating experiences of my life.
Yeah.
I got in there and I thought I could just change the world for the kids.
Mm.
And I became their camp director, brought in friends from the Girl Scouts, and did, just tried to build a program. They had a program going on for 8 to 10 years, I think, but it didn't have any, in my mind, any meat to it. So, I started, putting a sauce into it and, mixing it up and
Mm.
so forth and so on. During that time, I met Dr. Darlene Powers, who's medical director for the camp. And a lesson learned was Dr. Powers said to me one night, "We have two captains of this ship. I'm a captain and you're a captain. I'm
Mm.
not going to try to tell you how to do your activities and fun stuff with the kids. And you're not going to come in here and try to tell me how to do the medical services that we have to provide for these kids." And I said, "True story."
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
But what I got from that was a sheer amount of respect
Yeah.
from Dr. Powers. She respected what I brought to the table. It wasn't easy. Trust and believe me. Working with medical professionals is not easy. And there were people that didn't necessarily agree with Dr. Powers and the way she wanted to structure, this whole captainship thing. But, there were people who challenged me the whole time, challenged me for
Yeah.
years. No, you can't do this, and no, you can't do that. But I was resistant. And I felt like
Yeah.
if I don't do anything else for these children who may or may not have an opportunity to come back next year, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
I'm going to
Yeah.
take the punches. And I
Yeah.
have been doing this for 40 plus years um, because of kids with sickle cell disease. And because
Mm.
today, these kids are now adults like you,
Yeah.
old, older, doing things. We have one of our kids who became a doctor recently. We've had
Mm.
another one of the kids uh, earn their licensing as a nurse practitioner. We have an attorney. We got great kids. All they
Yeah.
needed was a chance to grow up and to realize sickle cell disease should not stop them in their growth. And that's how
Mm.
I work my that's why I'm here,
Well,
because
well,
they are who
and
we are.
that's been it's interesting because what you're saying really parallels your own path. You grew up alongside them. I mean, really coming into the organization part-time, running a camp program, and now being the CEO of this organization, having gone through just this process of being so thirsty to learn and to grow yourself and to help along while alongside these kids who you're wanting to support and help them grow. I think there's just a really interesting synergy there. It makes me feel like, well, I'd love for you to get into this. I'd love for you to get into this because I think a lot of times we see a need and don't know how we could possibly be the one to help support that need. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
I think that's very true, and I think, just like right now in the world, I'm trying to figure out how do I support something,
Yeah.
because everything is upside down.
Yeah.
And the one thing I have to keep in mind is that I can't be all things for all people.
Mhm.
So, can I make myself more available to the people that I serve right now?
Mhm.
Is do have I listened enough to understand that regardless to what's going on in Minnesota or DC or whatever the case is, these folks still have a need.
Yeah.
And not to I just can't drop that to
Yeah.
become more involved in something else. And I think part of the issue that we have sometimes, Shay, is we put too much on our plate and then we don't finish it.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of
Yeah.
person who cannot I have to finish stuff. Even
Mhm.
if I start cleaning out my closet and I know it's gonna take me 6 weeks, I'm gonna do it until 2 o'clock in the morning till I'm so close to being finished, it's finished,
Yeah.
And that's who I am. I can't start something that I can't finish.
Well, you've been so dedicated, and I think that's one of the things that honestly, aside from grandpa, who was a barber for how many decades, I don't even know. You're the only other person who I have seen spend this much time solely dedicated to these children and families and everyone, adults, everyone living with sickle cell disease. You've touched all parts of this work, from working with kids to the social services side to the going to Capitol Hill and working with trying to get policy in place. Like, you have touched all aspects of what it means to be a true advocate. And I think there's so much wisdom in a time like now when, yes, there are so many things that we want to try to get involved in to keep us grounded and part of the community that's pushing forward for the right kind of progress. And at the same time, we need to stay focused on supporting the people who fall in the margins and not letting them go as we're trying to handle all the other chaos that's around us.
You have to have reminders, and one reminder I have, and we talked about this not too long ago, was you made me a gift,
Mm.
and you made um, I'm gonna call it a picture box.
Yeah.
You put, a picture of a woman from a third world country carrying a baby inside of an old checkbook box,
Mhm.
and you handed it to me saying, "This is because you take care of people, that you're always working with people, you always make people happy," and all you put on the bottom was "Love, Cheria," and you also put a magnet on the back of the box because you wanted me to put it somewhere. That was obviously the goal. So I put it on my refrigerator, and for years, that stayed on my refrigerator as a reminder always that there are needs in our country, there are needs in our society, and there is a need for the work that I'm doing, even though it's the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to think about uh, people not understanding sickle cell disease. It's hard to think about the um, the issues of discrimination, the lack of access to care, and the early deaths.
Yeah.
That something that just completely tore me apart.
Mhm.
And at one point in my career, I just said, I cannot keep going to funerals. I just can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was a 6-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 21-year-old. And it was too hard. It was too hard to see these families go through this. And it wasn't fair, in my mind, for that individual that didn't have the opportunity to really live as full a life as they could have.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I like to drive. I like to get on the highway and punch it, and
Specific.
I long drives just thinking, "What is it? What can I do?" You
Yeah.
know? We're giving the kids camp. Yay, camp, We're having a great time, but at the end of the day, if I have to make the announcement, "Where's
Mhm.
so and so from this year? I'm sorry, they passed away during the year," that was not feeling great for
Yeah.
me. But
Yeah.
then I'm not a doctor. I don't have that training. I didn't have, um, the their wherewithal to understand some of the science and the research behind sickle cell disease, but I just knew something had to happen. And,
Yeah.
I met Dr. Nugent, to be
Mhm.
honest,
Mhm.
just not too long ago, about 20 years ago. And I heard her presentation. In her presentation, I thought, "Ooh, she really understands the community." Not many people understand the community. So I
Mhm.
grabbed her, um, but it was several years after that that I saw her again in DC, and I
Mhm.
went up to her, and we looked at each other, and we said, "We really ought to get together. We really ought to figure something out." And we've been on a journey together ever since then, helping to build access points for people with sickle cell disease around the state of California.
Yeah.
And it is a wild ride.
Yeah.
Anybody at Disneyland knows about Mr. Toad and Mr. Toad's wild ride we've been on. Trust and believe me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I just think you were saying about how, you You aren't a physician. You didn't go to medical school, but you found the way that you could be part of this work. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think I've probably gone to more courses, classes, and done any other number of things to learn what I've
Mhm,
learned. Had more conversations with individuals like Dr. Cluster and Dr. Johnson and, different physicians over the years. Dr. Powers, who was a powerhouse for me with camp. I mean, learning what sickle cell disease really is. Even Dr.
mhm.
Satcher, former Surgeon General, I believe, for the United States, learning from them. I was just open to learn. And
Yeah.
I took every opportunity that I could to understand this disease and to understand what was really happening to a person who had sickle cell disease.
Mhm,
While the hallmark of the disease is pain, what we understand is organ destruction is really the killer in sickle
mhm,
cell disease. And, how we get these folks to understand it. Even the person with sickle cell disease didn't know as much about their disease. So,
yeah.
if we have a foundation, what are we supposed to do with this foundation?
Mhm,
You know, what
mm,
what what's our role?
mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, what are people expecting of us, All I heard was we got to raise money. Raise money for what?
Mhm,
What? Raise money for? Um But then things started to evolve, and I knew education was the biggest piece that we had to explore. And education for me to understand, for me to be able to impart my knowledge to other people was what I needed to do. So I spent a whole lot of time reading. I spent a whole lot of time listening and
mm,
asking questions and trying to just educate myself as much as I could for the role that I had, as an executive director at the time.
yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there. I think the reason why I wanted to ask you about it, because I think there's a lot of people who think they want to do something. They have a passion, and it can be anything. It could be, in the creative arts, it can be some kind of mission-driven passion that they have, but they get so overwhelmed by not having the credentials, so to speak, or not having everything kind of perfectly lined up that they give up on that dream to really deep dive into something and just make it their mission to dive in. And I find what you did so inspiring, because I think it means it's possible for all of us to, when we put our mind to it and decide this is something that, like, has captured my heart and soul, and I wanna figure out how to contribute to it. There is a way forward if you lean in with curiosity, and if you dedicate yourself to learning and growing, you'll find your way. You'll find your way that only you can uniquely step in to support or make a
That
difference.
you it just triggered something in my mind, and that is when I applied to be, for the position of executive director, they looked at me like, "No." And I was like, "Well, why not?" I've this organization for quite some time,
Mhm.
I know what everybody's supposed to be doing
Yeah.
and how everybody can do it, but it was a no.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. I didn't give up because I felt like there were too many outside influences that could have derailed a camp program, and I didn't want that to happen. So I
Mhm.
stayed here. Mm. And then the second time uh, I applied because the person before me left, the second time I applied, I got out of a panel, I think like 3.5 votes.
Mhm.
It was a half a vote, and, well, I think you can do it, but, we're really not that sure. And then I went to meet with Dr. Haywood over at LA County USC Medical Center, and he offered me the job.
Mm.
Half-hearted.
Mhm.
"We'll see what you can do." And I looked at him, I said, with all due respect, you will fire me for something I have done, not
Mm.
something I haven't.
Mm.
I will give you or this community 100+% of my time.
Wow.
Watch. And at
Wow.
that point, when I left the office, I said, you just said that to the chair of the board, and you might not have next week. But yeah, I didn't want him to think that I was just trying to get into this as a vanity position. You know,
Yeah.
I've been here a long time, blah, blah, blah. No, heck no. I knew how to do this work.
Yeah.
I knew, but I needed, to have the support of the board of the organization. I had the support of several other people. So I just said what I said and
Yeah.
walked out of there like, I got a job. I'm the executive director. Let's get to work, you
Yeah.
know. But there was everything to tell me that I shouldn't do this. Ev-
And honestly, we'll never know, but who's to say that that wasn't one of the best things to happen? Because then you're just in full on prove it mode. Like
Yeah,
and you would have been incredible regardless, but to know sometimes I hate this about life, but sometimes knowing that people don't have high expectations really makes you want to bust through.
he did.
Um, it really does. It really does. And, I think it's so inspiring. The things that I find inspiring about you, well, there's so many, but one is just being your consistency and your commitment to this work. Like I said, I just think there's not many people I've not met anyone besides our grandpa, the barber, who has been so consistent. And I think just the tenacity to keep going through all the ups and downs. There have been so many ups and downs, and in the organization itself due to things happening in the society, how the economy changes, and then it changes everything about who's giving, and then it changes everything about, you know, even, clients and patients, whether or not they're getting care or wanting care or trusting that care is, gonna actually take care of them. There's just so many nuances that you have to go through as the world changes and evolves, and I've seen you just champion through all of them and continue to pivot and be agile and mostly put your people, and in this context, I know you have an incredible team who you love, but I'm talking about the people living with sickle cell disease at the forefront of everything that you do. And I'm so grateful. And I spent 15 years of my career in nonprofit, 5 of them with you at the Sickle Cell Foundation, because, well, and all of those 15 years dedicated to children living with different various diseases, whether HIV, AIDS, cancer. And it's all because you taught me this. Is because you modeled that we need to take care of the least of these and that we need to dedicate our time to supporting them. And it's funny, as we're having this conversation of having this like existential reality that I work with so many nonprofits now, and they're by far my favorite teams to get to work with. No question about it. But doing the mission work day in and day out is both the most challenging thing you'll ever do and the most rewarding. And I know that I hope you feel that your personal and professional growth is coming to a place where you really get to look at it and see what you've done in the community. And I haven't asked you a single question. So I want to ask you, I want to ask you, if you look at this full career, if you look at all that you've done, what do you think has been kind of the thesis statement of your growth through this process?
It's been intentional.
Mm.
If you have to have a purpose. You have to have a reason. Mm. You have to care, I think, enough about something to be able to put your whole foot in it, you know? And I think that that's the best thing, but the hardest thing about the work, you know? I would not say that if I left sickle cell 15, 20 years ago or whatever the case is, I don't know that it would still be here because this can be a thankless job. This can be a job that will send you to the poorhouse. And this can be the best thing that ever happened.
Mhm.
Some little kid running up behind you at camp and grabbing your hand,
Yeah.
saying, "Thank you. I had a great time." Um, Standing over children and looking at them at the campfire and watching them smile and sing and jump up and down and have fun. Walking into the hospital room and having a kid say, "Are we going to camp this year?"
Mm.
You know, there's a lot that happens in nonprofit. You said it, you
Mhm.
know, but the intent to continue, the intent to grow, the intent to take the passion that I have, and hopefully anybody who wants to work here, you know, can understand it's not about me. This has never been about me.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not that kind of executive director, CEO, whatever you want to call me, that travels, you know, just, you know, yeah, at a meeting. Yeah. I'm a worker bee. I am just that.
Yeah.
And I have a vision. You know, back in the day, they called visionaries daydreamers. So I'm a daydreamer. I've been a daydreamer since day one. You
That's
know,
it.
where I want to see things and how I want to see things and who's going to help us get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're definitely a visionary, and I agree. I don't know that the organization it's always needed a visionary that and you've provided that, and without it, I think it's really hard to imagine okay, for people listening, I'm just gonna say this, Mary will probably hate this, but you're a big deal. Like, I go play I remember going when I was working for St. Jude. And I remember introducing myself to someone there who worked in sickle cell, and they couldn't believe that I was your niece, and they couldn't believe, like every time anywhere in the world of sickle cell disease, your name comes up, you're a big deal. And it's because you are a visionary force and you keep trying to figure out how to do more for the people, how to give more care to the people who need it. And as I was thinking about the camp program piece, I know that that part always really keeps you alive because it's that, you know, I, I ran camp programs with you. Had the privilege of going to camp when I was a kid. And then I ran camp programs beyond working at the Sickle Cell Foundation. And I was actually just on vacation in Hawaii with all of these volunteers who were volunteers at one of the camps that I worked at.
Mhm.
There's something so important about that experience, and especially for underserved kids,
Yes.
that I know that camp programs across the board have taken a hit since COVID, but I think I'm hoping camp's gonna make a huge resurgence in our culture because the need for kids to be kids, and especially these kind of kids to be kids, is so important and so life altering. And when you talk about I mean, I think growing up at camp, and especially when I was younger, it felt like every year we were losing campers to the disease. And it was always this huge reality check of you have one life. And I had the privilege of not having sickle cell disease and not having a chronic illness that I was wrestling with every day. And so that perspective was heavy for me. But I also think that it became this responsibility to live as fully as I could and to also love on my friends in the camp community and support them in living as fully as they could. And I think that continues to perpetuate itself. So going back to, I'm hoping really that camps are going to have a big resurgence because I think people are getting sick and tired of their technology, sick and tired of their phones. They're wanting to have real experiences, and kids, they need it. They need
They do.
it so badly. And we need it as people volunteering or we need to see the joy in a child's heart when they go on a ropes course for the first time or when they make a s'more for the first time, like we need to see that because it reminds us of the goodness in us and of what could be and what's beautiful about this life.
I'll never forget, one of the very first years I was doing camp, I was walking with some kids down one of the little trails, and one of the kids just kept saying, shut up, stop talking." I'm like, "What's his problem?" And he said, listen to the birds." And I thought, "Whoa." He was fascinated by the sound of the birds. These are kids that
Mhm.
live in the inner city. They're not
Yeah.
listening to birds. If they are, they don't even know it's a bird. So I
Mhm.
think that when you hear and you experience those kinds of things, again, you realize the value that a week away with these kids would be exceptionally important to them. And they come back year
Yeah.
after year after year after year. And my responsibility is to raise the money year after year after
Yeah.
year after year. I tell people
Yeah.
all the time I have the blackest knees in the world because I'm always on them asking people to support this cause. But
Yeah.
I do think also it's well worth it. It's
Yeah.
it's just well worth making sure that we do the best we can to ensure that this continues to work for these kids. I just and
Yeah.
so when they grow up, then they become adults, and then we gotta make sure that they have the access to care that they need.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like
Well,
they
and yeah, yeah. Well, and it's because of what you were saying, when I think about the influence that being a part of a safe community has had on these kids to go off and become nurses and doctors and therapists and have these rich lives. So much of that is because of this communal support system and skill building that they were able to do through these programs. And so, um, I know you have been tugging at heartstrings to open up wallets for so many years. And I think if you're listening, I always like to talk about sickle cell as a social justice issue. And oftentimes we're out here looking for how do we get involved when we feel like there's so much social injustice. And I would just encourage the audience, to me, sickle cell disease is one of the most fascinating and important issues for us that we can really zero in on as a case study within a system that it's kind of, I don't know how, it's just like it's an epicenter of something really important where we can move the needle and bring justice if we invest in supporting causes like sickle cells in particular. um, well, listen, I feel like there's just so many things that I would could talk about. I wanna go into rapid fire soon, but I'm God, I'm gonna cry again. I'm such a tender heart. But I'm just so it's refreshing to be talking to you, and just part of it's remembering who I am and what I'm made of in the process of this work and this life journey that I've been on, trying to actualize who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to contribute to this world. And I can't the experiences that I've had because of you and your leadership and your dedication changed who I am. I am not me without I'm not me without you. I'm not me without the sickle cell community. I'm not me without the camps that I got to grow up in. I'm not me. And I am just grateful that you've done this not just for these amazing children and families and adults, but that you've really, this is legacy work. And I stand in honor of that legacy work because it's a potent and powerful life that you have lived. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten
Well,
to be there.
when you talk about legacy work, of course, that makes people feel old. Um, but when I think about this, the one thing that I think has been important to me is having you and having Charles and Esther bring their children and having Portia. And, if you expose people to different experiences, then you might get something that blooms. And the
Mhm.
reason that I think we've been successful is because I've exposed people.
Yeah.
I've asked, come, volunteer. Let me see what's going on. Let you see what kind of work I do. And, in most instances, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It just not part of the grand scheme of things. So, for all intent and purposes, we are here because of yous and
Mhm.
because, people have learned that giving is not so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Giving is not so hard. Opening your heart is not so hard.
Yeah.
But, it just takes a moment to step back and say, okay,
Mhm.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of you have risen to the occasion and have helped. And I'm grateful. And I'm very
Well,
proud of Auntie Mary. Trust and believe me. Very, very.
oh, well, we're very proud. And sorry if I made you feel old with legacy, but it's funny because recently someone asked me, they asked me a question about a project that I'm working on, and they said, do you want to do this for credibility, for legacy, for whatever? And legacy was the word that came up for me. And so it's very aspirational. So I hope
It is.
to, I hope, I hope to, I hope to be there one day. But um, I have some rapid fire questions that I'd love to
Okay.
ask you. Okay, fill in the blank. Growth is.
Important.
Hmm. What was the very first thing you realized you were good at when you were a kid?
Being an advocate.
Mm. What was your first job?
I was a inventory clerk for a department store.
Oh, what department store?
I
What was
think it
it
was called
called?
Chris or Woolworths or something like that. Something that
Woolworths.
doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore.
um, who was the best boss you ever had?
That's hard. I would say Al Landis, Mike Rogers, Yolanda Gorman, Dr. Nugent. I've had some great bosses, and I think because they have trusted me and I've trusted them.
Love that. What's something you're trying to learn right now?
AI.
Yeah, it's a beast. It's a beast.
Mm.
Every single one of us is trying to learn AI, and I think that's the name of the game. What's something you're trying to unlearn?
Jumping to conclusions.
Mhm. Yeah, man, there's wisdom in that. We all get ourselves worked up into a tizzy before necessary sometimes. Tell me a book or a movie that changed your life.
The book would be The Yearling. It was a story about a little boy who adopted a fawn after the mother deer was killed.
Mm.
It's a coming of age book, and I remember taking it at the library, and it was like 9,000 pages. I was like, "Oh my god." but I read it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And the movie that really still impresses me is the Count of Monte Cristo.
I love that movie too.
I love that movie.
I haven't watched it in years, but I used to love that movie.
We
I'm gonna
gotta
have to rewatch it.
we'll have to have a girls' day and watch the movie
That would
together.
be fun. I would love that. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Um, when growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
I smile a lot.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. When growth feels hard, how do you take care of yourself?
I take deep breaths.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I try to center myself. Like right now is not an easy time.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult time. So I'm smiling and I'm taking deep breaths out. It's,
Yeah.
it's a little hard for every now and again.
That's real. That is real. What would your 8-year-old self say about the life you're living now?
My 8-year-old self would say, you should not have allowed people to bully you when you were little because
Oh,
I'm not letting people bully me now.
amen. That is good. Okay. I love that.
I had to wear glasses when I was little. Oh,
Me too.
man.
Me too.
People were
They
all
call
in the
me,
glass.
well, and your glasses, we both, glasses have gone through some iterations. Now they look cute,
Yeah.
but they weren't always cute. I was
Coke
called,
bottle. Oh, my
mm,
God.
and we have bad prescription. Well, you got LASIK, so yours aren't as bad anymore, but we were on the struggle bus. They called me Myrtle
Oh,
Urkel
yeah.
for 10 years.
Serious.
Um, okay, last question is, when you grow all the way up and you leave this life, what is it that you hope to congratulate yourself on?
Being genuine.
Mm, that's good.
Just being myself.
That's good. Well, Auntie Mary, thank you for sitting and having this conversation and sharing. I'm so grateful for you. And I hope that the people listening realize how special it is to have you here and inspiring. And hopefully they go check out, is it SCDRF or SCDFC.org?
SCDFC.org.
SCDFC. Wow. I threw it back with SCDRF.
You
That was
sure?
the
You
old,
threw it all the way back to 1957.
SCDFC.org. Check it out. Make a donation. Love you, Auntie. Thank
Love
you.
you too, Shay. Keep doing what you're doing and make us proud. You're
Thank
on
you.
top. Take
All
care.
right, y'all.